We are here for the Trump-Musk attack on American consumers hearing. Our focus today will be on what could be one of the biggest cons in American history, the theft of billions of dollars from American consumers. Elon Musk and Donald Trump are going all out to try to kill the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and make it easier to cheat people out of their hard-earned money. President Trump ran on lowering costs for American families on day one. Those were his words. But instead of trying to lower costs, he and co-president Elon Musk are putting an end to the millions of dollars this little agency delivers every single day for working people. For everyone who gets scammed or cheated because the CFPB cops have been taken off the beat, costs have gone up, not down. The CFPB has been a spectacular success, uncovering over $21 billion in scams and returning that money directly to American consumers. Since it was established in 2011, it has also put important rules in place to simplify mortgage paperwork, run a complaint hotline that has helped more than 7 million people, and beat back rip-off artists of all kinds. But 2 weeks ago, Elon Musk, the world's richest man, woke up and tweeted, "CFPB RIP." Over the next 72 hours, the Trump administration, in conjunction with Mr. Musk's Doge hackers, stopped the agency's work, shut down the website, and locked staff out of their offices. The CFPB has been sidelined, but it is not dead. First, the actions by the Trump administration to shut down the CFPB are plainly illegal. Congress passed the legislation that created the CFP. Congress and only Congress can shut it down. Advocates are in court right now asking judges to enforce the law, and I am confident they are going to win. Second, as more Americans hear about the agency, there is a growing, fierce backlash. Trump and Musk aren't shutting down the CFPB because it is good for consumers. They are doing it to advance their own financial interests. The play is not hard to see. Elon Musk wants to offer a new X Money feature on his social media platform, but some other apps are already out there, and Musk would have to compete against them. By seizing control of the agency, Musk can now root through all of the CFPB's confidential data that Doge has accessed on these potential competitors. As Musk launches his new app, he faces oversight from the CFPB. His plan seems to be to eliminate the watchdog, which would leave him free to scam and steal however he wants. And that is why I invited Elon Musk to the hearing today. Congress and the public deserve answers about why he's trying to kill the CFPB and answers about what he would gain personally if he's able to shut the agency down. No surprise, Mr. Musk is a no-show. He is too afraid to show up in person and defend his actions. He hides behind a gusher of silly tweets. But Elon, in case you're watching from your bunker or your Oval Office, it isn't too late. We're going to be here for another hour and a half. We have saved a seat for you, and we all have plenty of questions. So, even without Elon, I'm liking our panel today. We've got Massachusetts Attorney General Andrea Campbell to tell us how the CFPB works with partners all across this country to stop consumers from getting ripped off. We've got Lorelei Salas, who recently served as the CFPB's Director of Supervision and was responsible for making sure that the agency was doing the job of monitoring the biggest banks and lenders in the country so that they follow the law. We've got Mariette Gillen, a mortgage originator who is well-versed in the CFPB's work to protect homeowners from abusive practices and to stabilize our mortgage markets, stopping the next big housing crash. And we've got Stacy McCall, an Army vet who was trapped in a doom loop with an auto lender, unable to transfer her title back home after her assignment overseas ended. She worked for nearly a year to resolve it unsuccessfully until the CFPB came to the rescue. There are thousands of stories just like this one from hardworking middle-class Americans of all political stripes. We released a new report today on consumer complaints left in limbo by the Trump administration's illegal shutdown of the CFPB. We found that the agency is helping thousands and thousands fewer people every week with complaints about getting ripped off. We see what Trump and Musk are up to, and we are fighting to put a stop to it. So I appreciate all of our witnesses being here to join us today, and I appreciate your showing why this fight matters. And Elon, if you are still out there watching, give your thumbs a rest and show up and answer some real questions. We'll be saving a seat for you. And for that, we are ready to start with our testimony, and I call on Attorney General Campbell.
Okay, press the button, ladies. First of all, good afternoon. Senator Warren, thank you. Members of the committee, colleagues, delighted to be here also with my fellow panelists. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. While today's hearing provides an opportunity to discuss the significance of the Consumer Financial Protection Board, it's also a timely opportunity to discuss consumer protection generally and the issue of affordability. Affordability is, as you know, the #1 issue affecting our constituents. Everything today is too expensive. Housing, groceries, utility bills, auto insurance, home insurance, medical insurance, child care, education, and so much more. Housing costs, for example, should, some say, account for approximately 30% of one's household budget. However, in Boston, for example, in Massachusetts, housing is the largest expenditure, close to $35,000, accounting for close to 35% of a household budget compared to the national average. In Massachusetts, currently, the median sales price for a home is close to $1 million. We are currently facing an energy crisis where residents' utility bills are skyrocketing. In many cases, prices have surged by 30%, and our elders, working people, small business owners, veterans, and more cannot afford to heat their homes and businesses this winter. Our families, including those working 2 or more jobs, are one unexpected and unanticipated emergency from potential financial collapse, bankruptcy, or homelessness. Sadly, it gets worse. In addition to increasing prices, there are companies and individuals preying on our consumers and devising ways to steal their money and scam and cheat them out of their hard-earned dollars. For example, our office last year handled over 24,000 complaints. We recovered and saved residents over $10 million through individual assistance. Complaints involved healthcare services, landlord-tenant matters, used car sales, and social networking-related complaints. While most view the Attorney General as one who only advances public safety, and of course we certainly do that, we do so much more. My #1 priority is to address the issue of affordability. And every day we work to help residents build wealth, hold companies and individuals accountable for scamming them, and work to put money back into the pockets of our constituents. We do this while working with a wide range of stakeholders, but most importantly, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Since its inception, the CFPB has returned over $20 billion to consumers. It was created to protect the homeowner struggling to pay their mortgage, the first-generation college kid who was unknowingly duped by a predatory for-profit college, the hard-working American forced to incur more and more debt, whose last pennies are being threatened by debt collectors using unscrupulous practices, and so many more. This mission mirrors what I, along with other state attorneys general, seek to do every single day. As the chief legal officers for our states, we protect consumers, our residents, and state economies. We investigate fraud, we prosecute predatory practices, and we work directly with residents providing consumer advocacy, education, and support, the results of which help put millions of dollars back into the pockets of families and working people. It is a core function of state, as well as federal government, to protect people from predatory businesses that drive up prices and trap them in debt. Given the nature of today's marketplace, we need both a national approach and state-specific approaches to ensure protection. That's why the work of attorneys general is made stronger through a partnership with federal agencies like this one. We combine resources and expertise to make meaningful gains for consumers nationwide. Since the Bureau's creation, the Massachusetts Attorney General's Office has worked with the agency on a number of important cases. In the wake of the financial crisis, the Bureau released new rules requiring all mortgage servicers to follow consumer protection laws with no exceptions. Massachusetts, along with 48 other states, used this directive to order the nation's largest non-bank mortgage servicer at the time, Ocwen, to pay back millions to homeowners who were pushed to foreclosure and underwater in debt due to the company's practices. In 2020, we worked with the Bureau to reach an $86 million multi-state settlement with the national mortgage servicer, NationStar, which provided relief to homeowners. State AGs and the Bureau have vigorously taken on predatory student loan lenders. My office actually led a $1.85 billion settlement with Navient, securing debt relief and restitution for student loan borrowers given their practices. And most recently, my office secured more than $40 million in a joint lawsuit with the Bureau against Key Credit Repair, which charged consumers outrageous fees without providing results in return. We rely on data from this agency to do significant work. At a time when federal administration is threatening to step away from these responsibilities, make no mistake, attorneys general will work to fill the void if necessary. Some call the CFPB a rogue agency, when in fact the agency is taking on those corporations that have gone rogue. Corporations that exploit consumers to build a profit, simultaneously making the playing field unlevel for other businesses. Some call the Bureau a woke, weaponized agency. I tell consumers they better wake up. What these companies know to be true is that the average customer has no weapon to fight back, that customers are either unaware of a scam or they are unaware and do not have the resources to recoup the money, the house, or the wealth that was taken from them on their own. And what's most important is, or what's worse, is most companies, and let's be clear, not all companies, do not care about the consumer. Companies have demonstrated that you can see a profit margin while actually helping consumers build wealth. You can follow the law and make a profit. None of us is here, of course, to just talk about what we do individually. It is about collaboration, and I'm delighted to be here. I would just remind us in this moment in time to not allow ourselves to be distracted by the rhetoric or the noise coming from the administration or the talking heads. It's abundantly clear to me that they are not like us. They are not like us. They are not like us. If we are unable to do what's necessary to maintain and revamp the Bureau, I will do everything in my power to help my people. And I say my people because I know what it means to grow up poor, for a father to pinch pennies and to, across different bank accounts, combine $10 to take it out of the ATM to buy food. I am blessed to have gone to Princeton University and UCLA Law and to serve as a Black woman and the first Black woman AG of Massachusetts. I don't forget who I am, whose I am, or where I come from. It is an honor and a privilege to serve as Attorney General of Massachusetts, to work boldly and courageously on behalf of consumers. Otherwise, why are we here? This work is not about me or even us. The work is about serving the public, as my colleagues will describe, of course, in their own stories. And in my faith tradition, about glorifying Him. It's about creating an economy built on the American dream, entrepreneurship, hard work, community, and jobs. And I reject this false notion that for all to benefit in our economy, we have to demonize others and suggest that one group of individuals is taking away jobs or opportunities from the other. This is our economy, an economy where all people, regardless of their demographic, their status, or their geography, have a level playing field with equal access to capital, equal access to relationships, and the infrastructure they would need to be successful. And now they are talking about, and this is my last point, and I'm going to wrap up, Senator. Now they are talking about sending checks to people from their access and steal your data DOGE efficiency work. I also don't like government wasting our time and our money not helping actual people. Yet there's nothing efficient about getting rid of this bureau. This is an agency that is less than $800 million to maintain, and yet is returning billions of dollars to consumers all across this country. And who will benefit? The very institutions, the banks, the financial institutions that previously received a bailout, and frankly, will look for another gift, another bailout. So again, I am proud to be here to represent Massachusetts, to work in collaboration with all of you, including my fellow panelists, on protecting this bureau and the important work you do every single day. Thank you, Senator Warren.
And thank you, Attorney General Campbell. Ms. Salas.
Thank you, Ranking Member Warren and senators and my co-panelists for being here today and for the opportunity to speak here. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau was created in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis, when people around the country lost their homes, their jobs, and their retirement savings. Since then, the CFPB is the only federal regulator devoted to protecting the financial lives and futures of American families. And for anyone watching today who may be concerned about the illegal attempt to shut down the CFPB, I want to be straight with you. Since the new administration took over the CFPB, you, your family, and the economy itself have become less safe, secure, and stable. Your parents are more likely to see their retirement threatened by scammers and fraudsters. Your kids are more likely to be ripped off or given the runaround by their student loan company. Your sick spouse is more likely to be harassed by a debt collector for a medical bill they do not even owe. Your nephew, who is getting ready to be deployed overseas, is more likely to be targeted by a predatory lender that sees them as just another dollar sign in a uniform. These are hard things to hear, but it is the truth. Millions of Americans are more likely to get ripped off because the CFPB was essentially fired from doing the job Congress gave it. This agency that returned more than $21 billion to harm consumers, that is more than $4 million each day for American families, is no longer able to fight for you and your family. And without a cop on the beat, honest businesses must now compete against law-breaking companies that were given the green light to break the law. Because key CFPB IT contracts have been randomly terminated, confidential trade secrets housed at the CFPB will become more vulnerable to hackers. Just a month ago, the world was remarkably different for you and your families. The CFPB was making sure that companies were following the law across the country so that Americans were protected from fraud and abuse. As the head of the Supervision Division with a staff of 550 people, we were in the business of preventing fraud and law-breaking by big banks and other financial institutions every day. Most people are unfamiliar with the work of supervision because it happens behind the scenes and is confidential. You likely will never know that we instructed your lender to give you a refund because neither the company nor the CFPB will say it publicly. But in the most recent 2 years, the supervision team advised banks and mortgage companies to refund more than $350 million that were charged in illegal junk fees to their accounts. The supervision work is about prevention and making sure consumers are made whole when the companies make errors due to a lack of investment in their compliance operations. Just like we expect safety checks on airplanes before we board a flight, the CFPB staff go to work every day to protect your money. This is when, late on a Saturday night, a couple of weeks ago, when we were instructed to stop all work, I knew my days at the CFPB were over. I was ready to lead the team through a transition, not be a part of the decimation of the agency, and putting American families at risk. Just in recent months, we responded to complaints from people who were being offered medical credit cards while sitting in the dentist chair, who thought they were entering into payment plans and instead ended up with a high-interest credit card. While doing a routine review of a mortgage company, we came across a woman who was put into foreclosure proceedings because she failed to notarize a form, a requirement she was not made aware of. And we fixed that so she was able to keep her home. So while the agency staff was sent home packing, it is all American consumers that are paying the price. Right now, the federal government is falling in its most basic responsibility to protect the American people. I want to be clear, getting rid of the CFPB is an insult to Congress, to the rule of law, and most importantly, to you, your family, your neighbors, and your community. The CFPB must get back to work. That is what the law requires, and that is what the American people deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Salas, and thank you very much for all of your work on behalf of American consumers for so long, and I appreciate your being here today. Ms. Gillen.
Thank you for allowing me to be here today. My name is Merritt Gillen, a mortgage broker and co-owner of CAM Mortgage Partners. I first came to know about the CFPB and their protection of consumers through my own experience with the mortgage servicer during the payment process. My first mortgage was co-signed with my parents. I was not monitoring my credit due to recently having a premature child who was hospitalized. One day my mother called, said the mortgage was not being paid and her credit score was being impacted. I confirmed the payments were on auto draft and clearing my account. Due to having paperless billing, not monitoring my credit, and no call from the servicer, it went completely under the radar for me and my husband. After failed attempts begging the servicer to figure out why the payments were not being credited to my account, it was my mother who instructed me to file a complaint with the CFPB. The complaint intake process was easy, and I provided documentation as supporting evidence. The CFPB complaint is what it took for the servicer to admit it was their system not applying the funds they received. The issue was resolved, our credit reports were corrected to reflect, as agreed, payment history. I started out as a loan originator in 2017 for Caliber Home Loans. I became a branch manager 2 years later, preferred lender for local real estate brokerages. In 2022, I was named a top originator in the Scotsman Guide for one of the largest mortgage servicers in the country. I have served on several board seats for the Women's Council of Realtors, volunteering with local organizations that assist veterans in my community. In the most recent years, I have further educated myself on the regulations surrounding consumer protection and servicing to better set up my customers for home ownership. In one circumstance, a customer asked their servicer for a forbearance option in June 2024. They were told paperwork would be prepared and the next 3 months of their payments are paused. July, August, September passed, and in mid-September, their forbearance case representative said it would simply take too long to finish the forbearance paperwork. The borrowers were instructed to make up all payments in one lump sum by October 1st, 2024, or be faced to serious delinquent payments for the months they missed. I had her contact the CFPB, and within 1 week of filing, the forbearance paperwork was finalized, and they resumed their payments on October 1st, 2024. Another case I have seen is a mortgage underwriter was laid off and impacted by Hurricane Helene floods in North Carolina. The mortgage servicer cashed the insurance check to repair her home, but the funds were applied to her monthly payments on the house and not the repairs. She took to social media, begging for help as she was unable to get through to anyone on the phone in servicing. I instructed her to file a complaint with the CFPB. I know of a loan originator who had taken an application for an active duty veteran through a proprietary mortgage origination system. The required mortgage insurance and VA fees did not populate for the initial loan estimate as required by the Truth in Lending Act. The mortgage company forced the originator to cancel the application, restart the loan, disclose the fees to avoid having to pay the cost to cure of under-disclosing these loan fees. This resulted in the originator resigning from the company because he felt guilt and that his ethics did not align with how they did business. And he was also forced to sign an NDA to not report them to the CFPB.
Ms. Gillen, I really appreciate your coming and telling both your personal story and what you encountered as someone who works in this field. Thank you. Ms. McCall.
Thank you so much, Senators, for the honor to be here today. My name is Stacy McCall, and I'd like to share my personal journey regarding my vehicle shipment and title registration after moving here to Maryland. I am a combat veteran that served in the U.S. Army for 20 years, including a 13-month deployment to Iraq and duty stations in Fort Riley, Kansas, Fort Lewis, Washington, Boston, Massachusetts, Fredericksburg, Virginia, and several different duty stations in California, with a final station in Puerto Rico. I retired in February of 2023, and I now live in Silver Spring with my wife and 2 children. In July of 2020, while 7 months pregnant, I purchased a Toyota Highlander financed through Toyota Finance with monthly payments of $657. Upon my retirement, I relocated to Maryland, planning to have my vehicle shipped as part of my final move. However, what I thought would be a straightforward process quickly turned into a financial and logistical nightmare. In January of 2024, I attempted to arrange for the shipment of my vehicle to Maryland, only to find that Toyota Financial would not provide the necessary letter for the shipping process. Instead, I was advised to refinance the vehicle. This was not a feasible option for me as a recent retiree with rising interest rates and a new reduced income. After persistent follow-ups, Toyota eventually agreed to provide a notarized document for shipping, but I received the wrong document. And when I got to the port authorities, they rejected my request to leave the island with my vehicle. As a result, my family was forced to leave the vehicle behind. And at that point, we've been paying on the Toyota for 4 years, paid over $30,000. I continued to pay the monthly payments for 3 months without access to the vehicle. After finally receiving the correct document in late February, I returned to Puerto Rico, incurring an additional $2,000 in out-of-pocket expenses for hotels, flights, and meals to retrieve my vehicle. But I thought that was it. We finally had the vehicle. Once the vehicle arrived in Maryland, I obtained provisional registration, but was left waiting for Toyota to send out the state title. I was assured by their customer service that that would arrive within 30 days. However, as time went on, I received a 90-day letter from the Maryland Department of Transportation notifying me that they still had not received the title. Despite months of phone calls and emails, Toyota Financial continued to advise me that my only option was to refinance, even though I had done nothing to break the original contract. My applications for refinancing were repeatedly denied or required such a jump in monthly payments that it just wasn't affordable. In October 2024, I received the final letter from Maryland Department of Transportation. It was a 100-day letter warning that my provisional registration will expire without the title, leaving my family paying on a vehicle that we could not drive. In January of 2025, after nearly a year of frustration and countless phone calls and emails, I filed a formal complaint online with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. To my relief, Toyota responded within 8 days that they would send the title. A title was sent days later via FedEx, showcasing the stark contrast between their responsiveness after the CFPB's intervention and the long struggle prior to it. I have now successfully registered my vehicles just 20 days ago. So February, just 20 days ago. I don't want to think, honestly, about the dire financial situation my family would be in without the help of the CFPB. I am the personal chauffeur to 2 small ones. I'm a graduate student. I'm a disabled veteran. And CFPB's support ensured my family can meet our obligations without any undue financial burden. And for that, I'm eternally grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McCall, and thank you for sharing that story with us. We really appreciate it. Senator Blumenthal is going to start our questions. Senator
Thank you.
Blumenthal?
Thank you, Senator Warren. I want to thank you for your leadership in establishing the CFPB and for bringing us together today in this somewhat novel but very, very important forum. And I just want to tell our witnesses here today, this group probably is as many as we would have in a formal hearing with all of us sitting up there. And it speaks to the level of interest and commitment that we have, and our thanks to each of you and everyone here for being here. Ms. Campbell, General Campbell, I should say, I had your job for 20 years. And I think Senator Cortez Masto would agree with me as a former Attorney General, the most productive and rewarding work we did was putting money back in people's pockets before the CFPB got started. And in fact, the CFPB for Connecticut alone, 80,000 people in Connecticut have money back in their pockets for a total of $45 million because of the CFPB. I submitted an affidavit, formal affidavit under oath in the litigation to preserve the CFPB that's ongoing right now, in which I pointed out that my office, and I think all of our offices, use the CFPB to deal with constituent complaints. And under oath, I said in that affidavit, 50% of the time, the CFPB succeeds in their view. In the other cases, we take it forward in my office to try to deal with their complaints. So this agency is more than just another alphabet acronym. It deals with real people, puts real money back in their pockets, and has impact on their real life. Now, I could ask all of you questions, but I got a question for Elon, wherever he is. You've just announced, just in late January, that you are establishing a peer-to-peer payment system, a digital wallet, in partnership with Visa. Are you, by any chance, aware that the CFPB is suing Bank of America, Wells Fargo, JP Morgan Chase, because of their failure to deal with fraud on peer-to-peer payment systems, suing them after an investigation by the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigation, which I head, that showed the level of reimbursement for fraud, unauthorized payment, has dropped from 62% to 38%. In other words, they are not returning money to people who are defrauded by their peer-to-peer payment plan. And Elon is beginning a system when the CFPB is suing the banks that are already doing those kinds of plans, and he has succeeded in shutting down this agency. So, Elon, how do you justify shutting down the agency that's going to be looking at your peer-to-peer payment plan? How do you justify shutting down the agency that is going to be looking at your finance systems for Tesla? How do you justify shutting down the agency that has jurisdiction and oversight over many of the other financial issues that you are going to make money from doing? And that is a question that I think, Elon, we want you to answer. Senator Warren and I and others have asked for you to disclose your financial statements. You seem to have a new concept of conflict of interest, which is, if it doesn't conflict with my interest, no problem. So there's a lot at stake here, and I am very, very grateful to all of you for giving a face and voice to the benefits. I'm going to yield to others because we have a very strong group here today. But again, I just want to thank Senator Warren for being such a champion of consumer interest. There is nothing that impacts people so directly as the big financial institutions of this country, which are becoming bigger and bigger, exerting their power to screw over and cheat ordinary, everyday Americans. And that's why we're here. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Blumenthal, and appreciate all your work. Senator Reid.
Well, thank you, Senator Warren, and thank you for your great work. Let me thank the panelists. I particularly want to thank Ms. McCall for your service in the Army. I discovered how soldiers, sailors, airmen, guardians are used by financial companies a long time ago. I was the executive officer of a parachute company in the 82nd Airborne Division, and I spent a lot of time talking to my troops and wondering why they signed a contract to buy a car with 250% interest. I thought that was a little outrageous, but more importantly, why would anyone try to exploit a soldier serving the nation and defending the nation? So it got me a little bit upset and put it back in my mind. And in 2006, I worked on a bipartisan effort with Senator Bill Nelson and Senator Jim Talent. We passed the Military Lending Act. One of the big things there was putting in the ceiling of 36% interest on military personnel and doing lots of other things to help. But along comes this very brilliant woman and the architect of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And what I did was I stuck in her bill the Office of Service Members Affairs. And they are particularly charged with protecting service members. And the first head was Holly Petraeus. She did a great job. And, you know, this is something that is going to be lost. And who's victimized? The men and women who are serving our country. People are being deployed, and they're going to be, there's a technical term I used in the Army, but I can't here, right? Roger, yeah. So, and it's all for a buck, and it's disgusting, excuse me. Well, let me just focus a bit, and it's, Ms. South, can you just give us an idea of how the Bureau enforces the MLA and helps service members?
So in the Bureau, we use every tool at our disposal to protect service member families and their service members and their families and every other American consumer. And so we have both the ability to go and examine companies and behind the scenes look at how American consumers are being treated, whether they're being sold products above the 36% interest rate that the law caps the interest at. We also have our enforcement colleagues at the Bureau who will bring matters to court when we uncover fraud and abuse against these member families.
Well, thank you. I noticed in my home state of Rhode Island, there are 761 complaints from service members. So this is not some esoteric idea. This is on the streets, people being affected, like Ms. McCall there. Your comments about how effective, you've probably seen it not just with yourself, but with other service members. They've used the Consumer Financial Protection.
Yes, sir, your comments about young soldiers getting high interest rates vehicles is definitely something that. Yes, Senator, your comments about service members getting vehicles with really expensive interest rates is definitely something that resonates. It's a briefing we get it straight out of basic training and AIT training talking about the predatory lending when it comes to vehicles specifically. Military people typically like to drive fast, so all the sports cars typically come with a higher price.
Well, I would pull up in my Ford Escort to see these, yes, to see these huge red pickup trucks, brand new, shining, but wait a week or so, they'd be repossessed. So it was tough. Thank you all very much. Thank you, Senator Warren.
Thank you very much. Senator Smith.
Well, thank you so much, Senator Warren, for pulling us together to talk about this important issue. Thanks to our panelists, and thanks also to all the folks that are in the audience. I can only imagine that each of you has some personal understanding of who has benefited from the work of the CFPB, and that's what I want to focus on today. So I want to take us back to 2008 in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis, a crisis that was caused by subprime mortgage lending, profiteering, and the irresponsible risk-taking of big banks. Congress decided to create the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And I remember 2008 vividly. I was the chief of staff for the mayor of Minneapolis that year, and I saw throughout the city my neighbors being foreclosed on and forced out of their homes. People living in North Minneapolis in particular were hard hit by often disreputable subprime mortgage lenders who took advantage of their hope to own their own home and achieve the American dream. And I want people to know that this community is the heart of the Black community in Minneapolis. My city has a long history of redlining, the legacy of which you can still see in our community in lagging home values, in income inequality, and in some of the largest home ownership gaps in the whole country. So the effects of that foreclosure crisis back in 2008 is still seen today. And so what did Congress do? Congress enacted the Dodd-Frank Act to put a stop to the kinds of predatory mortgages that left families in my hometown of Minneapolis and all over the country with balloon payments and other kinds of mortgages that were destined to fail. And because we did this, because we said that someone should be on the side of consumers against these big financial institutions who were ripping them off with impunity. And as you have all said, the CFPB, it worked. It is working. It has provided over $21 billion returned to consumers thanks to the work of the hardworking public servants at the CFPB. And so, among the first things that President Trump and Elon Musk and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent did when they took office, when they came into power, was to shut down the CFPB. And you got to ask yourself when something like this happens, who wins and who loses when you do something like shutting down the CFPB? I think that's a question that Americans are asking, people in this audience are asking, who is going to win and who is going to lose when this happens? So I want to focus my questions particularly on the issues of housing and how the work of the CFPB around protecting consumers when it comes to housing. And let me start, if I can, with you, Ms. Salas. As you think about the work that you have done at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, how have American homeowners benefited from the work of the CFPB to protect their interests?
So the Bureau devotes a lot of energy to looking at mortgage companies, both that originate loans and that are servicing those loans, because that's the reason why the Bureau was stood up. Right. And we do routinely reviews of mortgage companies. And I was just giving an example about a recent case that we saw where a woman was placed in foreclosure proceedings because she failed to notarize a form. And she didn't know why her application was denied. She had applied to a program where she could reduce her monthly payments. Was never told of the requirement and was never told she could fix it. Our staff were looking at those files and questioned the company and said, give us a reason why you denied this application, and they didn't have one.
Right.
So they had to go and fix the problem, and the woman was able to keep her home. And that is work that is happening on an ongoing basis. Well, was happening as of 2 weeks ago, right?
Right.
We are also seeing problems where what we call the zombie second mortgages that are coming back to life, that people were not aware were still existing in some of the lenders' books. And people are getting calls about loans that they thought didn't exist anymore. That is work that is not being addressed right now. When we were told to stop all work, 2 weeks ago, we were in the middle of dozens of examinations of mortgage lenders, auto lenders, all kinds of businesses across the country.
So all of those examinations, the work that you were in the midst of, that all gets stopped. And who wins and who loses when that happens? I mean, I was really struck, Ms. McCall, by your story about your dealing with Toyota Financial. And when it's just one person against this big, powerful company, like the company is going to win. But what happens with the CFPB is that then suddenly there is the will of the rest of America standing behind you, and lo and behold, you get the response that you should have gotten from the very beginning. And I think that this is the case when it comes to folks that are taking out mortgages, folks that are trying to get a fair shake in the housing market. I just want to, Senator Warren, just bring everyone's attention to another example. This was a recent settlement with Fairway Independent Mortgage Company, an organization that was found to be redlining in neighborhoods in Birmingham, Alabama. On its own, individuals couldn't stand up to that by themselves, but with the CFPB behind them, that organization had to stop that. There had to be fees paid and reparations made so that that wouldn't happen anymore. This is the purpose of this, of the CFPB, and it is ridiculous to me. I would just want to, I'm going to ask one more question of Ms.
Do you think
Gill.
we might wrap this up so
Okay.
we can let every?
I will, all right, I will stop with that, but thank you very much, Senator Warren, for
No,
this.
I so much appreciate all your hard work in this field for so long, Senator Smith, and appreciate your being here today. Great questions. Senator Cortez Masto.
Thank you, and thank you for those questions. You can see how passionate, along with you, we all are about what is happening here. Thank you to the panelists for being here at this forum. I so appreciate it. It is important that we shine a light and get information, the truth out there to the American public and what is actually happening. Now, I know, and as a former Attorney General, the importance of filing complaints. Consumers have very few options. One is the Attorney General of your state, but where do they go at a federal level? Where else can they look to? It has been for a number of years in the CFPB, right? That's where they also file complaints. And so General Campbell, let me talk to you. Can you, I guess, put a finer point on why it is important? People would say, well, we still have the attorneys general. They can still do the work. Why do we need the CFPB? Can you put a finer point on why this is important?
Thank you, Senator. And as I mentioned throughout my comments, it's a collaborative process. I would like to think that every Attorney General in the country would work with the Bureau, not only on the data and trends information that they put together that helps inform which cases we prioritize. Zombie mortgages was mentioned as one. That is something we are tackling in Massachusetts as well. And you know to pay attention to that because of the information gathered from this Bureau that is essential. The second is if we're able to share resources and human capital to take on these cases, we have a larger impact. We can increase the settlement amount, the millions of dollars in restitution, which we've seen in collaboration with the incredible staff and team at the Bureau. And let's be clear, not every Attorney General is prioritizing affordability and consumer protection, unfortunately. As the federal government is stepping away from consumer protection, some AGs, including Massachusetts, are stepping up, and some are stepping away wholeheartedly, bowing down to the interests of, say, certain corporate interests or others, undermining the office's ability in certain AG states to be able to really help consumers. So it's not consistent, what we're doing in Massachusetts in every single state across the country. So you will have elders and veterans and other consumers who are left out without anyone to fight for them on their behalf, with no resources and weapons to fight back, who may, and this is what is worse, see the same company delivering the same scheme and the same fraudulent behavior and deceptive behavior, get a victory in Massachusetts, but sadly not get a victory in another state. So it has to be national and along with state efforts. And then we, of course, know, lastly, companies have a national footprint. They don't operate usually in one state. They operate in several states. So you need an ability to complement the state work with a national focus and priority too.
Yeah, and thank you, and that is so important. The other piece to this that I know as a former AG is not every state has the resources they need to take on some of these big predators, right? And those big predators are counting on that.
That's right.
And so it does help to have somebody at a federal level, a good partner, to bring the predators, the bad guys to the table to really take advantage, to protect your consumers in your state. So why should one consumer in one state not get the benefit of that protection just because there's not enough resources that AG may have in their office, correct?
Correct.
Let me, one more question, and then I'll pass it on here. But we all know that President Trump has allowed Elon Musk and a handful of his young staff to access the data and the CFPB. And this is really highly sensitive information. It's personal information to so many Americans across the country. So Ms. Salas, a question for you. How could Elon Musk use the CFPB data to benefit himself and his companies?
So I don't want to speculate on what he can or cannot or will do, but I will say that, yes, we do have in our
Let me ask you this,
supervision
because I don't want to
enforcement-
put you in an awkward spot
Yeah.
either. What is their concern, and what concern do you have, knowing from inside, what access does he have to personal information?
So I'm very concerned about the information that is in our databases, in supervision and enforcement databases, where we obtain very sensitive data for consumers because we need it for our matters, for our cases. We also have very confidential information from the companies that we examine, that we enforce the law against, trade secrets. Again, this is all very sensitive information that is very closely maintained, right? So anyone who has access to that information or who had access to that information before was someone who had a need to know and had gone through a long process of background checks, conflicts of interest checks. No one at the Bureau can have financial interests in any of the companies that we supervise.
Right.
That is the way it was. And I don't know who has access to what right now, but that is something that concerns me a lot.
Well, and the other part of this is that the consumer who is being exploited has concerns about sharing information with the federal government who's supposed to help them, concerns that they might exploit that information. There's a chilling effect. They will not come forward, and those predators or bad guys out there will continue to prey on them, and even more so. And so that's the challenge here. The other thing, and I can't stress this enough, and I think we all believe this, who is Elon Musk? He's private sector. He's not even a government employee. He's a billionaire, and who are these individuals that are getting access to federal government information on Americans and their personal information? And there should be an outrage and an uproar about what is going on here, because this is not who we are as a country, and this is not what we promised those consumers when we said, we're here to protect you, and we're here to fight on your behalf against those predators that are out there, not to exploit their information for the benefit of a billionaire.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Cortez Masto. And if Mr. Musk had shown up, you could have asked him those questions yourself. That's right. We may just have to put him online and let him answer by thumb. Senator Blunt, Rochester.
Thank you, Ranking Member Warren, for this hearing, and especially thank you for your leadership. It's really hard for me to believe that it was maybe a few weeks ago that I literally sat across from you and asked the origin story of the Financial Protection Bureau, Consumer Protection Bureau, and here we are today actually fighting for the people, fighting for consumers. I want to thank the panelists for your work and also for your story. I think you are representing millions of people, and so thank you so much for your voice. And I don't think the importance of the CFPB can be understated. It created in the wake of one of the worst financial crises in this nation's history. The agency is tasked with protecting all Americans, including older Americans and veterans. It doesn't discriminate and ask you, are you a Republican or are you a Democrat or are you an independent? It stands up for the people. The CFPB has used its civil penalty fund to return money to consumers that were defrauded, that were scammed, that there were predators that went after them. The bottom line is, I don't think there's a person in this room or watching who isn't in some way touched by the work of the CFPB. And as was stated, over $20 billion, that's billion with a B, has been returned to nearly 200 million Americans. And in my state of Delaware, over 27,000 consumers have had $14 million returned to them. The chances that the CFPB hasn't helped someone are very low. Yet, the Trump administration, under the leadership of Elon Musk, has ordered the agency to stop its work protecting Americans. and it has fired and threatened to fire hundreds of the very civil servants that help so many Americans. I will start with you, Ms. Salas. My home state of Delaware is home to Dover Air Force Base, several Guard and Reserve facilities, and numerous generations of service members. According to the CFPB Office of Service Member Affairs, the agency has received over 400,000 complaints like the story Ms. McCall shared. Last year, the CFPB saw total complaints from the military community increase by 27% from 2022 and 98% compared to 2021. Taking care and supporting our military families is a priority, and it should be a priority for President Trump. Could you tell us how would the lack of CFPB enforcement impact service members?
I do not know where people go now. Where do they go to file complaints? Yes, the complaint database may still be up, but there's no one to answer those complaints. Those were the basis of all our work. We would look at those complaints constantly to figure out where to put our time, our resources. And I'm really worried about what we used to see is that if people either complain to the Bureau or complain to the companies that sold them the cars or the homes, if they don't come to us, they often go to social media to air their grievances. Well, some of the same people who are behind these new products also control social media channels. So I just don't know what happens to the consumers, to all Americans' voices when they have a problem, when they lose money, when they're charged junk fees, or their car, they wake up to not find their car in the driveway, and they don't know where it went.
I just had a question. Ms. McCall, how did you find out about the CFPB?
It was happenstance. My wife was venting to a friend about the issue we were having with our car, and she recommended looking at the CFPB website. And 5 steps later, I had written up a quick summary, and like I mentioned earlier, 8 days later, we had a resolution.
So to Ms. Salas's point, if there is no website, if there is no place, then we have a problem, particularly for our military. Another area that I've focused on is dealing with seniors being scammed and defrauded. And I want to kind of get to my question because I know time is of the interest. But General Campbell, can you briefly describe the kind of enforcement actions that you've taken to address elder scams? And then piggyback on the question to Ms. Salas, what happens, whether it's a veteran or a senior, right now? What will happen without a CFPB?
Thank you, Senator, for your question. And you're right, regardless of whether you're a Republican, Democrat, Independent, or some other party, it doesn't matter. And at least in Massachusetts, every complaint we track them by category, all the scams. And the demographic that is harmed the most is elders. So much so we established an elder justice unit so that all of the complaints across the office could be not only intersectional in our response, but also more impactful. And we work with the Bureau to, of course, take on companies that are targeting, of course, our elders. But we're looking at cryptocurrency, which is a major concern right now, everything having to do with folks who are in our assisted living or nursing homes, and the products and services within those homes or attached to that. The basic consumer protections in terms of companies who are exploiting them, utility costs, you name it, it is significant. And to your point around, yes, state AGs can step up, but in no way will it be equal across the country if you are in a state where you do not have an attorney general that will step up and protect your interest or to protect you against fraud. You really do need this Bureau.
Thank you so much, and I yield back.
Thank you, Senator Blunt Rochester. Leader Schumer.
Thank you. It's great to be here, and thank you so much, Senator Warren, for holding this so important hearing about the CFPB. I have a special fondness for this agency, not only because it helps so many people in New York. Look at this. 507,000 complaints in New York, 14,000 complaints from service members, all needing help against financial institutions, 7,500 from rural. There was a 129% increase to show you that the word about CFPB is spreading, a 129 increase in complaint volume. and 13,000 complaints from older Americans. 173,000 people got relief. That's huge. And I have a special fondness because I, along with Senator Kennedy, wrote the legislation to create the CFPB, because we knew that consumers had no ability to fight back against these banks, these large banks and financial institutions, until they had someone on their side. CFPB proved to be on their side with their first leader, Senator Warren, who gave us the idea to put it together, gave Senator Kennedy an idea to put it together. But she wasn't in the Congress. We were. I was in the Senate. And we passed it, and it's done so much good, as these statistics show. So right now, middle-class families will be hit the hardest about when we talk about the kinds of changes that would occur if there's no CFPB, the kind of nakedness that consumers would feel financially if they were alone without protection. And so it's very, very, very bad. Fees shrink your income. I want to talk a little bit about bank fees and bring this up because this is something that's happening right now. It was quiet, but we want to make it public. And that is, there's a plan in Congress right now to show you why we need the CFPB. There's a plan in Congress pushed by Tim Scott and French Hill to raise bank fees, starting with overdraft fees. It used to be if you had an overdraft, you could be charged up to $35 per overdraft. So overdraft after overdraft after overdraft, people would pay up to, hundreds of dollars, all because of an overdraft that they may not even known about. It may have been 5 cents. It was disgraceful. So the Biden administration actually put in a regulation that said no more $8, only $8. Now, the new chairman of the House Financial Services Committee, French Hill, and the new chairman of the Senate Banking Committee, Tim Scott, have introduced legislation that would roll back Biden's regulation under a CRA. It's disgraceful. This is what we're up against. This is why we need a CFPB. These are the powerful forces who want to charge consumers large amounts of money that they can't afford for all kinds of things that they don't deserve. Bank fees, ATM fees, minimum balance fees, outlandish cashier check fees, notary fees, account inactivity fees, the $8 cap, as I said, on credit card late fees, no more fair credit reporting.
Yeah.
Isn't that incredible? All these things that help people, but this proposal by the two new Republican leaders show what these Republicans want to do, both in the executive branch and in the legislative branch. They're just on the side of the big banks, even when the big banks are being totally unfair to consumers who have no way to fight back. They want to eliminate the one place that gives consumers a fighting chance, which is the CFPB. It's disgraceful. This spotlight hearing is one of many. This is what we're doing. You think that the Banking Committee, under Republican leadership in the House or Senate, is going to have a hearing on this? No way. But we are. And we are bringing this to the public's attention. We are asking the public to fight back and notify their congressmen and senators that they don't want the CFPB put out of business or diminished because they need it. And again, the question that average Americans ask, who's on your side? Well, right now, the Republicans, by this legislation and by what they're doing, what the Trump-Musk administration is doing to eliminate the CFP, show you they're on the side of the big banks. We're on the side of working American families. We are going to work and work and work to fight this very, very nasty, vicious, and harmful action by the administration. Thank you, Senator Warren. And could I just ask maybe Ms. Salas to comment a little bit on this legislation that I don't know if you're familiar with it. They're trying to do it sneakily, but.
Well, we had made a lot of progress in the last couple of years, right, to get to junk fees and make sure that regular people are able to keep every dollar that they've worked so hard for. And it's really devastating to see that all of that good work and all of those protections for consumers may be going away. And I hope that they don't, and we fight to keep them in place.
Anyone else want to comment on this proposed CRA to knock out the rule that says $8 for overdraft fees?
I'll just, thank you,
Thank
Senator.
you,
I'll
General.
just quickly say, you know, you hear that, and of course, the consumer, folks who are paying attention, and of course, Senator Warren, we want people to pay attention to see what's going on. And they may think they have no place to go, right? As we work in collaboration with all of you to fight back on proposed legislation that would dismantle consumer protection wins, it really is at the state level, at least, AGs who are willing to step up, make sure our websites are working, create an easier way in which folks can file complaints with our office and complement what's happening at the federal level and then fill the void, whether it's on junk fees, which we have a draft proposed regulations right now in Massachusetts, working with AG James in New York, other colleagues, across the country to fill the void. And so, yes, we want them to pay attention to what the heck is going on behind closed doors, and at the same time offer some solutions and ideas on how we can do it at the state level to complement the work that may not be happening, sadly, at the federal level.
Thank you, General.
Thank you,
I
Senator.
just cannot tell you how many times I used to hear from people that they had a small overdraft and then they had to pay hundreds of dollars, and it's infuriating. Not only because of the money people lose out of their pockets to help their families, but just because of the basic unfairness of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Senator Merkley.
Hey, greetings, everyone. I just can't understand what it is about the Trump administration that hates the American middle class or American consumers so much that they want them to be the victims of predatory financial products. And no one comes here to Congress and says, we want toasters to burn down our house. So in general, the Consumer Product Safety Commission is not controversial. I don't know why the CFPB is controversial. Back in Oregon, I took on the payday lenders, and we knocked them out of our state. When I came here, Senator Dodd asked me to jump into the battle to end predatory mortgages. Senator Klobuchar was very involved in this as well. And some of the things that we pursued were getting rid of the triple option loans and the exploding interest loans, the prepayment penalties that meant you were locked into an exploding interest rate, and the steering payments that went back to mortgage brokers secretly, in which they were incentivized to steer people into bad loans. And Ms. Salas, have you seen that the CFPB over time has managed to maintain I guess you will, the fairness and integrity of home mortgages so that the dream of home ownership is indeed a dream, not a nightmare?
Yes, certainly. It is a fundamental part of the mission of the Bureau and of the staff at the CFPB to make sure that mortgages are fair, that homeowners are not at risk of losing their homes because of unfair terms in their loans.
And without the CFPB on the case, are we going to see the potential return of predatory mortgages that turn the dream of homeownership into a nightmare?
I think that we are going to put every American at risk, and we could end up in another financial crisis.
Wouldn't it be an enormous disservice to Americans across the board to allow that to happen?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I often hear the number, and Elizabeth has made sure it's burned into our minds that the CFPB has written checks to American families of some $21 billion. But if those practices had not been stopped, how much more would American families have lost? I guess the question I'm asking, yes, checks were written, but because you all are policing predatory practices, I've always thought for every dollar where a check is mailed out, maybe another $5 is saved in advance of families that never have to go through the predatory experience. Is there any sense, do you have any sense, is there any estimate of how much has been saved because of the good regulation of financial products?
I haven't done the math and haven't seen anyone's math, but I think what you're saying is very true. The impact of the work of the Bureau is incalculable. The moment we go and we show what are illegal practices by some of the biggest banks, you see that other banks fall in line and change their practices. And so we're benefiting a lot more American people than we are actually directly touching in our cases.
Well, I'm just going to continue to say I think at least $5 is saved for every dollar the check's written out. So I'm giving you credit for over $100 billion
I'm in.
to the Americans. And it's just so much better to stop those predatory practices in advance and have to struggle after the fact. I'm noting your story, Ms. McCall, and all you went through, the torture you went through, the persistence you had to exercise in order to try to get fairness on transporting your car and your title. The goal, when your complaint is filed, also what CFPB does is says, how can we prevent this from happening to others? So they never go through it in the first place. We are going to lose all of that with the shutdown of the CFPB. And I just don't understand how it is that Trump hates fairness for consumers. But it comes down to this. His philosophy is families lose, billionaires win, and we are united in saying that is a terrible vision for America. We want billionaires to pay their fair share, and for families to have a strong foundation to thrive. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Senator Merkley, and I like your estimates. I think that's good. Senator Van Hollen.
Thank you, Senator Warren. I do think it bears repeating that we should be having an official hearing on this issue in the Senate Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committee. It's a dereliction of duty, in my view, for that committee of jurisdiction not to be addressing this national emergency and what's happening at CFPB. So, Senator Warren, thank you for pulling us together today, because what we are witnessing in real time is the most corrupt bargain in American history. Elon Musk contributed $280 million. He spent that amount of money to get Donald Trump elected, and now Donald Trump has essentially put him in the cockpit seat when it comes to federal agencies, and they are shutting down important services to the American people in order to set up this big tax cut for the very wealthiest Americans at the expense of everybody else. This has nothing to do with government efficiency, right? And Ms. Ellis, CFPB is case in point, because you were all put on administrative leave, were you not?
Yes, as far as I know, most of the staff is on administrative leave.
Right. So they essentially told the CFPB staff, whose job it is to look out for American consumers, to stay home and not work. But at least for now, they're still getting paid, right?
I don't know for sure.
So
but
I just want to point out how inefficient this is and how the American people are not getting the benefit of their bargain. By shutting down the CFPB, they're essentially giving free rein to all the fraudsters and cheaters and scammers who are out there, and companies that just want to drag their feet and not do what they're responsible for doing when it comes to American consumers. And, you know, it has returned, as we've heard, billions of dollars to the American people. In my state of Maryland, it's been millions and millions of dollars. Ms. McCall, great to have a fellow Marylander here. Thank you for your service. And your case is a very clear example of what's important. You worked for over a year to have your issue addressed with respect to a pretty simple, what should have been a transfer. And when you called the CFPB, you got it done in 8 days, right? So by shutting down, by shutting down the CFPB now, all those people who were like you, Ms. McCall, who were hoping to get a little bit of help and relief from people who were not doing the right thing, corporations are not doing the right thing, they have no recourse. So, Ms. Salas, I do want to ask you about the data issue, because I just saw CNN reporting that Elon Musk's Starlink just got an FAA contract. So here's the person who's essentially getting access, anyway, to data at the Treasury Department, CFPB, and other places. Fortunately, federal judges have hemmed that ability in. But I don't want to ask you to speculate on what Elon Musk may have gotten access to or what not. But he is talking about setting up a payment system under X that would be a competitor to Venmo and a whole bunch of other payment systems. If he were to get access to that information, would that put him in a sort of give him an unfair advantage over his competitors?
we have some litigation, right, that is obviously public against PayPal, Cash App, Zelle. We have in our systems records, information from those companies. We've been looking at a number of digital wallet companies, payments companies in supervision, and we have information for those companies too on the technologies that they're using. We have information on the secret sauce of the credit models that people have used to people have built with artificial intelligence to make decisions about whether you get a loan or not. All of that very sensitive trade secret information is within our systems.
I appreciate that, and I know time is short, so I do want to point out, though, the CFPB not only goes after bad actors, but it does help protect good actors. Ms. Gillen, can you just talk about how your ability to report bad actors that are competing against your company actually creates a better and more even playing field?
Yes, so for those of us that try to protect the consumer and set them up for expectations of homeownership payment changes, it's hard to see people get away with this so often when there is the CFPB. So without it, it would be, I think, probably catastrophic.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Van Hollen. And I'm going to ask all of our senators, I know this is hard, but if we can keep it short, because we're going to get pushed out of this room, and we've got so many people who want a chance to be able to speak on this issue. So with that, Reverend Senator.
They always say be brief right before the preacher talks. I wonder why. Thank you, Ranking Member Warren, for pulling this together. Thank you for your leadership from the beginning on this issue. We're here today because an unelected billionaire, nobody elected Elon Musk, posing as co-president, is trying to delete the CFPB, the only financial regulator dedicated solely to protecting Americans' wallets and pocketbooks from scammers and predatory financial services companies. The CFPB, let's be reminded why it was created. It was created in the wake of the financial crisis that Americans saw when Wall Street bankers got bailed out while millions lost their jobs, lost their homes, lost their life savings, lost their retirements. Let me get right to the questions because we all understand just how critical this issue is. But let me just point out that when you file a complaint with the Bureau, the CFPB sends it directly to the company on your behalf. Americans need to know what they're getting. Most companies respond within 15 days. It took less than that for Ms. McCall. This is a model of government efficiency. That's the tragic irony of this moment. If you want to see what government efficiency looks like, it's a government agency that gets this kind of response, often from bad actors who don't want to respond, and has returned some $21 billion, not to the Treasury, but to the American consumer. One predatory practice that has increased costs on consumers that Donald Trump says he wants to address are these opaque hidden fees. If you want to address consumer costs, deal with junk fees. These fees can prevent a working mom from being able to afford a routine car repair so she can get to work. They could mean a person with diabetes cannot afford their insulin, or that a family may have to skip a meal during the week to make ends meet. Ms. Salas, what effects have the Bureau's policies toward limiting junk fees had on consumers?
So we placed a lot of emphasis on looking at junk fees across different markets for consumers. We looked at the mortgage market, we looked at banks and auto finance companies in the last 2 or 3 years. And in addition to the litigation that my colleagues in the enforcement team have brought to the courts, we have we have advised companies to refund consumers over $350 million just in the work that supervision does. And that is money that consumers, American families don't even know it was the Bureau behind the company saying, you must give this money back, because again, the work is confidential.
So very efficient, very effective. What do you anticipate happening if congressional Republicans repeal the overdraft fee rule?
I'm afraid we will go back to where we were a few years ago, where consumers didn't quite understand why they were paying all these fees on their bank accounts, on their savings, on their checkings accounts, because of the complicated ways in which banks decided to order the different payments. And for people who are struggling to make ends meet, you cannot afford to lose $25, $30, $100 from your bank account.
Okay, one last question. Consumer or medical debt is a major problem in our country. We see it especially in Georgia. According to the CFPB data as of June 2023, about 5% of Americans had unpaid medical bills on their credit reports, down from 15% in March of 2022. So from 15% now to 5%. Ms. Gillen, it is coming up on 2 years since the credit bureaus made this announcement. What changes have you seen on applicants' mortgage applications, and has this change made it easier for Americans to rightfully qualify for a mortgage?
Yes, I have seen fewer medical debts being reported, but guilty as charged. If I see medical debt, I'll have the borrower dispute the charge, and I'll pull a new credit report.
Well, good for you, and
To fix their
you
credit score.
And the CFPB magnifies that many, many times over. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Senator Warnock. Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you so much, very important hearing. And just from my view, when I look at these Minnesota numbers, 15,340 complaints that have yielded relief. That's incredible. You've got 2,000 complaints from older Americans, over 3,000 from veterans. Thank you, Ms. Gillen. And dismantling this CFPB is the opposite of lowering costs, the opposite. And I hope the Trump administration understands this. Republicans claim that they're going to reduce financial burdens, yet their actions will drive up costs for consumers. We know what it was like before we had this bureau. So my question actually is of the person that's not here, Mr. Musk. I do appreciate Senator Warren inviting him, and I guess I'll just put it on the record, but my question is of him, when his company X is expanding into digital payments, yet at the same time, he has taken an interest in removing the CFPB, which is responsible for ensuring those digital payments are safe for consumers. The CFPB has enforced actions, right, against Venmo, PayPal, Cash App, for failing to prevent fraud, but under the current freeze, those protections have disappeared. So my question of him in writing will be, why should consumers trust that the financial markets will regulate themselves without the CFPB? And I guess since he's not here, I'll ask you that, Ms. Campbell.
Thank you, Senator. They won't, right? I think we made it clear, and I think some senators have spoken to this, it's a national emergency. We're all here sharing stories and powerful stories of how this is working, how this bureau has worked to help consumers all across the country. And while I will respectfully disagree with one senator that consumers don't have any recourse, they do. Of course, they can go to a company, but they can also go to their state AG. But we also know that, of course, state AGs are not aligned in the ways in which we tackle consumer protection. But many of us are. So I want consumers to know that that's a path as we work together to hopefully bring back this incredible bureau online to do the work they've been doing nationally.
Exactly, and I thank you for your work that you do with Attorney General Ellison of our
dear
state.
friend.
And thank you to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Klobuchar. Senator Hassan.
Well, thank you, Senator Warren, for bringing us together, and to the panelists, thank you so much for your work and for being here and for being willing to talk to us about this. Since its creation, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has been hard at work protecting Americans from unfair fees and predatory practices by big banks, among other predators. The CFPB has received thousands of complaints on behalf of Granite Staters, including service members, rural consumers, and older Americans, and it's delivered tangible results. We all have heard the figure nationally, returning $21 billion directly to Americans. And in fact, in New Hampshire, more than 3,000 people have received money or other relief because of the CFPB. I think it's hard for people to imagine that they would be scammed or preyed on until it happens to them. So can you just give us another example or two? I wasn't here for all of the testimony, so I apologize, but how will shutting down the CFPB make it easier for predatory actors to target Granite Staters with unfair practices?
So let's just talk for a moment about credit reports,
Yeah.
right? And I think you talked about finding errors in your credit reports. Just in the last 3 years, we've received 4.5 million complaints from people who found errors in the credit reports.
Okay.
Now, you need a credit report for anything you want to do in this country, whether it's to get an apartment, to get a cell phone,
Right.
anything, a loan for a car or a home. And if that credit report is plagued with errors or includes debt you do not owe, well, your chances of getting that loan are diminished.
Right. That's a great example. Thank you so much. Thanks, Senator Warren.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Hassan. Senator Kim.
Well, thank you again for pulling this together, Senator Warren. I really appreciate all of you coming out. And the way I've often talked about some of the work that we do when I hear from constituents in New Jersey is this idea of customer service governance, really trying to think through how we can be responsive to the needs of people. And I think with CFPB, there's a particular component of it, the Consumers Complaint Program and Database. This is a key tool that allows, for being able to flag scams and other things. So, Ms. Hollis, I guess I wanted to ask you, if we're seeing a halt on CFPB's work and we see that spread to the Consumer Complaint Program database, what do you believe the impact will be on consumers in New Jersey and, frankly, across the country?
Well, if you have a great AG in New Jersey, hopefully they can take some of those complaints too. But generally, I would say that we use that information, one, to get companies to respond to those complaints, right? And they did that quickly. But we also use those complaints to decide which companies we needed to go and examine or initiate an investigation on. Now, that work is not happening. So while the complaint database system is still up and you might still be able to file a complaint today, I think that was the case as of this morning, there's no one there to respond to that. There's no one there to look into them. And I'm just concerned that, again, there will be less options for consumers who are feeling they're being cheated by the company they gave money to.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the answer is.
Attorney General Campbell, I guess I wanted to just ask you, what state tools and laws do you have, and the state's attorney generals have to kind of fill this void as we see this challenge come before us?
Well, you do, I have to just say, have a great AG in New Jersey, AG Plotkin, and we work together collaboratively quite a bit.
Did he tell you to say that? Is that what's
No, he did not, so
Yeah.
tell him I said it. But we have a lot of great tools, and one is obviously our ability to go to court, to file complaints on behalf of consumers, groups of consumers, to do it in collaboration with the Bureau and so many others, to do it in collaboration with other AGs. Dare I name it, sometimes some Republican AGs, to have an impact to put money back into the pockets of workers. We have the ability to file legislation. In Massachusetts, we're actively reviewing proposed regulations related to junk fees, sort of filling the void possibly of where we can't get junk fees done at the federal level to protect folks. So we have to do it in our state. We hope others, of course, will join. We have the ability to do consumer outreach and direct advocacy and education. And let's not discount that tool, which I think is equally effective as a litigation tool. A lot of elders don't know they have been scammed until we do some education or outreach. They have no idea that their money was just stolen, or they feel a sense of shame where they don't want to come forward. So these partnerships with organizations helps. So a lot of significant tools at the state level. But again, because the portfolio and the ways in which companies operate are national and international, you need this national partner. You need the Bureau to be able to complement the work and to be even more impactful.
Yeah, just one last question. Ms. McCall, I wanted to just ask you, because what I see happening here, Musk and Trump, their work right now depends on people not knowing what the government does, not knowing what the impact is. And I think a big part of that I often ask is, how do we speak human about this? How do we take what we just talked about and explain that in the storytelling way? And I think you were just so powerful in getting that across. So I guess I wanted to just ask you for advice. How do we do better here in the Senate, in government, amongst advocates and others to talk tangibly about this and really try to hit home to people, what the impact is?
Well, I'm not a professional in this field, Senator.
But you're very effective, though.
But I would guess just telling people where we can get help. If I would have known about the CFPB in January when they refused to ship my car the first time, maybe I would have had it a lot sooner. since they would have been there to advocate for me. So I would guess just getting out as much communication, exactly how it's impactful to everybody.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think people hear CFPB and understand what it means on a basic level, but it definitely means a lot when you talk about paying your car note and your mortgage. That everybody understands that.
Yeah, it means that someone's on your side. With that, I'll yield back.
Thank you so much, Senator Kim. Senator Kane.
Thank you, Senator Warren, for holding this important hearing, and thanks for all of your testimony. The numbers in Virginia are interesting, and it leads up to a question I have for Ms. Salas. So 177,000 complaints submitted by Virginia consumers, and 55,000 led to relief, which is that's like an all-star batting average. If 320% were ones where, yeah, you actually are entitled to relief because you got ripped off, that is actually quite a significant percent. It shows how much scamming there is out there. But this intrigued me. Of the 177,000, 17,700, 10% were from service members, and an indeterminate other percentage from veterans. Now, the civilian workforce is like 1% veteran. About 1% of American public serves in the military. But more than 10%, and again, if you add veterans to service members, it's probably like 15% of these complaints are from service members and veterans. Ms. Salas, why is it that these scammers are so focused on going after service members and veterans?
We know that there are payday lenders that are like set up outside some of these military bases, right? I think it's obviously offensive to have companies go after service members who are defending our country. Why is that happening? We have people who are fighting for us and who are not there to know whether there's a loan that they have to address communications on. They are often, again, sold products that are above an interest rate that the law allows for.
Can I say this? You're being more diplomatic than I would be. It is intentional.
Yeah.
They know that these people are often very young, and they know that these people have certain guaranteed benefits that are coming their way. And so if they can get before this often very young person, that young person may be susceptible to a scam. And that's why they go after them. And similarly with veterans, may not be so young, but the scammers know they have some benefits coming their way. So why don't I get in the middle of this? Last thing I'll say, and then hand it back to the chair. This kind of reminds me, the disproportionate numbers of veterans and service members who are targeted, reminds me of what's going on with the layoffs right now. The civilian workforce is about 2% veteran. The federal workforce is 30% veteran. And the federal workforce disproportionately puts veterans into probationary status because of some technical reasons about the way veterans get jobs in the federal government. So the layoffs that are going on right now disproportionately hurt people who have served this nation and are entitled to be respected, not kicked around. They are basically, the president saying you're fired to these veterans. And it's the same phenomenon here. These are people we should be thanking, not kicking, but we're administering kicks and then not thanks, and expecting that thanks for your service, an empty word, will mean something. People are smart. They're not dumb. They know when they're getting kicked around. And that's what's going on here, and that's what's going on in the layoffs that are happening in the federal government right now.
Thank you, Senator Kane. Senator Also Brooks.
All right, thank you so much. Looks like I'm pulling up the rear here, so I won't be long, but I want to thank Senator Warren, first of all, for her foresight. I think many of us recognize that there would be no CFPB if it were not for her. So I want to thank her so much for her foresight in making sure that this existed. It looks like the billionaires have literally run amok. They are getting what they paid for. They are raiding our government. And what is so sinister about what they're doing is while they run amok and they are really hoping to profit from our government, then they want to leave people like Ms. McCall, who is my constituent, in a lurch. And so I know that Senator Kane just spoke about veterans. I understand that while you were serving our country in Iraq, you came home only to find that a car you purchased you couldn't get. So just can you tell us how long it took for you to try to resolve the issue with your car?
Yes, Senator. I had retired from the Army in February 2023, and my family was moving here to Maryland. This is where we decided to purchase a home and live out our rest of our lives, ideally. And it took, from the moment I went to go ship the car in January 2024, it took a year before I had the titling for that vehicle. And the state of Maryland told me in October of 2024 that I'm legally not going to be allowed to drive it until I get that. So we were kind of panicked for about 3 months before we knew of the CFPB, and was relieved when an email online, and 8 days later, they call telling me that they will do the thing that they were legally contracted to do in the first place.
So only 8 days after CFPB got involved?
Yes, Senator.
After almost a year of trying to get this resolved. And so what would you say would have happened? How would you have resolved this if you didn't have the CFPB to intervene and to get your car that you rightfully had paid for?
You know, I was really frustrated at the time. Like when I was looking to refinance, I was going to end up paying like $300-400 more on what I already had just to try to refinance, which is what they kept advising. We were just at our wits' end. Can you repeat
So it may have been without a remedy if the CFPB had not stepped in. I'm just wondering what would
We were thinking about selling it. We had, you know, a lot of things up in the air, but we had already filed the complaints with Toyota. We'd already made all the emails and just didn't know what else to do.
And left basically without recourse. Okay, so the last question I'll ask, Ms. Salas, just very quickly. You know, all of us have heard that Elon Musk, the unelected co-president, has gained access to information, sensitive information, Americans. And I would like to know, could you describe the sensitivity of consumer and company data which the CFPB has custody of?
For the cases that we look into and that go into litigation, we often obtain very sensitive consumer information, names, account numbers, social security numbers, addresses, you name it. And only people who have a need to know will access that information, right? In addition to that, we're getting information from the companies that we are supervising, and it includes all kinds of financial records from those companies. It includes trade secrets about how they come up with some of these products that they're selling. It's information that I don't think they would want to fall into the hands of their competitors.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So thank you very much, Senator Alsobrooks, and thank you all for being here. I am very grateful to those of you who came and told your story. I'm very grateful to everyone else who showed up. I want you to know we are fighting for the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. This is not the first time that a group of billionaires have tried to take down the CFPB. They have failed every time in the past, and Elon Musk and Donald Trump will fail at that task this time. The CFPB is here to stay. Thank you all for being here. Thank you.